How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of a podcast I like to call Ghoulish. With me, Max Booth, an undead host. On today's episode, I'm talking about kids. Not the movie, just humans. Small humans who haven't lived long. Kids. You know them. You were once one, probably. You might still be. Maybe a kid is listening to this podcast. It's possible. I don't know. Are you a child? Write in ghoulishpod@gmail.com. I'm talking with LP Hernandez, a friend of mine who lives locally in San Antonio. He has a book out called Stargazers. It's out now. It's a great book. I loved it. It's a novella. Great little novella. It's about, well, it begins with just people around the planet just looking up at the sky and gazing at the stars, you could say. And it gets trippy from there. I'm not gonna tell you too much. Look it up. Buy a copy. Highly recommended. Stargazers by LP Hernandez. On today's episode, we're talking about kids. It's the kids episode, folks. A lot of you have been asking me, Max, when are you gonna do an episode about kids? Well, it's arrived. The time has come to talk about kids for some reason. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you pick up LP's book. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you review and subscribe the podcast. It could use some reviews. I know. I hate to be that guy. But this podcast could use some reviews. It could use a boost in the audience. How do I go from this way? How do I improve, you know? That's the question. And the answer is to do an episode about kids. And that's what I've done. Enjoy. So, I just finished the book like 5 minutes ago. I loved it. Holy crap.
Thank you.
That was devastating.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah. So, to begin with, tell me, in the after note, you write about this was originally going to take place in the daytime and there was some type of gag involved. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, I don't think, since I've already kind of put that out there in print, I guess I can go ahead and speak to the gag. People may know me from the NoSleep Podcast. I've written quite a few stories for them. So I had this idea, and I was going to ask before I submitted it, just so I didn't waste my time writing a 4,000 or 5,000 word short story to end on a gag, and they said would have no interest in it. So I had this idea of something very similar to this happening, except it's in the daytime. And so whatever the main character is, people are outside staring at the sun instead of, staring at the night sky. And eventually he's, the last person left, and these people are kind of just decaying over time. And it still has that kind of end of the world feel to it. And at some point he hears a phone ringing in someone's pocket. And so I've got this like 2,000-3,000 words of probably more body horror, like seeing people being eaten alive by birds and this person just dealing with it. And he finally hears like, oh, there's a phone ringing. He's like downtown somewhere, and then finds the person who has the phone in their pocket, picks it up. And eventually the gag is going to be that it's someone asking about his car insurance or warranty, his warranty.
That's great.
So,
I like it.
And then, but the idea of just someone like, I think that image stayed in my mind of
Yeah.
some like people outside looking at the sky, and that kind of just went to the rock tumbler in my brain, and eventually came out as Stargazers with a whole different story. But
I think it's definitely spookial at night. There's something pretty disruptive about them looking in the daytime, and that's also pretty, like, it's good imagery, I think, of just
yeah,
staring up at the sun. But with the night, there's more mystery to it, I think. Like, what are they looking at? Whereas I think if it was in the daytime, it would be pretty safe to conclude, oh, they're just looking at the sun.
yeah. And then
It's
I
like,
had, are they going to follow the sun as it treks through the sky? Or are they looking at a fixed point? And I was like, I didn't really work through all of those kinks in the story yet, but I know the imagery of stargazers, people just staring open mouth at the sky, is what stuck with me and found a new home.
have you spent much time looking at the sky?
I have a telescope. That was my tax return gift to myself a year or two ago. So I've been able to see, like, Saturn and Jupiter. Not super clear because we're light polluted city, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I've never used a telescope. Like, I've only seen people use telescopes in movies.
It doesn't look as crisp and clear. I mean, you can tell it's Saturn. You can see there is a around it, but it's like, if you gave a 4-year-old finger paints and told him to make Saturn, that's kind of what it would look like. Jupiter's there. You can actually see the bands and stuff and the moons around it, but
Have you seen anything strange with this telescope? Do you spy on neighbors, perhaps?
not allowed to talk about that. My lawyer advised against
Yeah.
self-incrimination, but I also hate mosquitoes, and they're like my favorite target. So my time outside is targeted. Like, I know there's something I can see, I'll go take
Yeah.
the telescope out, dress inappropriately, like full gear. We live in the same town, obviously, so
Yeah.
what it's like outside. Cover head to toe, and then I'll see what I can see.
So you take it outside. Okay. In my head, mostly, I guess, because my telescope knowledge comes from movies, I was imagining you had it next to a window. But I guess mostly in movies, they do use telescopes just to be peeping toms, now that I'm thinking about it. So that's a different type of telescope usage, perhaps a different episode for a different time.
Although I did see something strange on the moon. There were these people that appeared to have been left there.
Some fellows.
Fellows.
Oh, 5, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've felt about those fellows on the moon. I think someone should do something about it. I don't know.
Write a book.
They should write a book. They could call it Moon Fellas.
Yeah.
Just FELLAS. I think that's the way that you should spell it. So the reason you're on the podcast today is you have a book out called Stargazers, which we have kind of talked about now. And the topic you chose for today's episode is not the sky, but children, kids. Do you want to speak upon that? Why did you pick kids?
It was actually pointed out to me in another podcast I was on, and this is only my third, so I'm not like, trying to like puff my chest. That I do tend to write a lot about kids, and that was based off of my short story collection, The Rat King. That's what that podcast was about. I never thought about it before, and then I kind of just did the math in my head with that book, and then other things I've written, which got me wondering why. What is it about writing from a child's perspective, or young adults, that kind of coming of age? What is it that I find that I keep coming back to it? So I did a little bit of, for our interview, a little bit of Google research, and not many people have spoken about it. So unfortunately, I can't plagiarize someone else's thoughts. It's pretty much all from me. And I think from a writing perspective, I found that you don't have to invest so much time in getting the reader invested, because they're already invested. They should be. I mean, kids can be jerks, but for the most part, if you have a kid, whatever age, as long as they're still in that kind of that age range of being considered a kid, because we all know teenagers suck, but then you're already invested in a way that you may not be for an adult. You may have to kind of sell someone or give them a reason to care. But if it's a child, or 10 or 12-year-old, then you already care. There's the innocence factor too, in that a lot of times they're discovering or they're encountering things it's the first time. So for Stargazers, there is a child in it. It's not the main, it's definitely a grounding element for the story, but it's not in any way coming of age. But for a lot of the stories I've written, when the children are encountering something strange, it's the first time they've encountered it. Whereas an adult, maybe they've been through it before, or they have just a different kind of reaction to it. They have different resources. The kids, it's sometimes just their wits or whatever. But, an adult, I guess, could throw money at it, or I don't know, maybe has a weapon. I'm not sure, depending on the nature of whatever they're up against.
I think also when writing about kids, you don't have to be too consumed with having to explain things, because children, unlike grown-ups, I forgot the rule, Jesus Christ, operate almost only on emotion, and they don't really have logic in their brains yet. They don't seem to really think that way. So in writing, especially like from the point of view of a kid, all you really need to be consumed about is how that child is going to react emotionally to it, and you don't need to be weighed down by logistical concerns or anything like that, like you would be, say, if you were writing from the POV of someone in the 50s.
Yeah, there's that, when characters make awful choices in movies and books, and then you're always asking or telling yourself, I would never do that. With a child, it makes a bit more sense, because like you just said, they run on emotions or fear or whatever it is, and they don't have the life experience to maybe make a better choice. So you can't hate a kid for doing something dumb in a book or in a movie.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, being a kid is something everybody can relate to, because unless you will like Benjamin Button, you will a child, right? So I mean, it's like, oh yeah, I was one of those things once. I can relate to this book. So that's like that's like a cheat code for writing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is trying to recapture, whatever childhood you might have had. And then, so there's a whole coming of age genre, and, reading about adventures that we may or may not have had, and still kind of imagining yourself there. And then more conventional horror with like, that's not coming of age, that just happens to have a child protagonist. So it's cool kind of seeing it from both directions. I feel like coming of age is having a bit of a renaissance, maybe, or on the cusp of it. It feels like there's a little bit happening.
Oh yeah, I haven't noticed, but I don't pay attention to things. Tell me more.
Well, I know Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror, is constantly kind of championing her favorite coming of age books. I read Sticks and Stones recently, all coming of age, and it just feels like maybe vampires were right before Twilight, like it was right on the cusp of something happening where maybe the world just sucks so much that we're all trying to be kids again.
Trying to think of a better time, right?
Yeah.
When you were a kid, were you writing that even back then, or did that come later on?
Writing terribly, yeah. I started probably like I would say most people that end up being horror writers with Scholastic book fairs and Goosebumps for me. And then, but simultaneously, I was also reading. I think I read Carrie when I was like 9 or 10, earlier than I probably should have. So while I was still reading, about Slappy and stuff, I started reading about, all the goodness and grossness that was in Carrie. Probably didn't understand all the message of that book. It was more just the gore and the fun of it. But I started writing stories about that age, 9 or 10, sentient scarecrows and alien abductions, and I still have some of that stuff. And
nice.
It's funny to read what I thought was good back then. Like I thought, I'll have this done by the summer, and then it'll be on the movies by Christmas. And
oh yeah. Did you also used to fantasize like, I'm gonna be going on like the Conan O'Brien show? We're gonna be like, meet the kid who wrote a novel that became a movie.
Yeah, for me it was David Letterman, but I had that exact, because he occasionally would have a writer on. So I don't think I got to the point where I was like rehearsing my answers to his questions, but I definitely thought that was my trajectory. Didn't think it would take me 25 more years before I even got close to it, but
Yeah. The thing that needs to go, the thing that needs to be said, in case I have any children listening to this podcast, which I hope not. Any kid writing something, it's not going to be good.
No.
I mean, no child writes like a good book, I assume. I mean, maybe there's been like child writing geniuses. Wasn't there some like teenager who wrote a dragon book or something and that became a movie?
Yeah, and then there's I think the Bronte sisters when they were 16 or 18, and Mary Shelley actually.
Yeah, and like children usually do not have books out, but as you get older into the teenage years, like even S.E. Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders.
Yes,
is that her name? Okay, I mean she was 16 when that came out, so like sometimes exceptions, but if you're 9 and listening to this podcast, first of all, please leave a review on iTunes. Second of all, just keep writing. It's not going to be good, but it will be good one day, maybe.
Yeah, it's like that rock tumbler. All those rough ideas, you just keep working on them.
It's just so cool to me that kids could be listening to this podcast.
Yeah,
that's pretty terrifying. I did an event last night in San Antonio, and I had books for sale, but also stickers for the Ghoulish podcast.
Yeah.
And I saw many small children just take those and walk away. So it's really possible kids will just listening to Ghoulish.
I'll keep an eye out around town.
Okay, thank you. I mean, recommend it to any kid that you run across. Okay. I mean, I don't know. How many kids do you come into contact with in a day?
So in my job right now, I'm at the age now where I call people that are full-grown adults kids because they're just so much younger than me. Yeah. And in my job, we're 19 and 20-year-olds around us constantly. So I consider them kids, but as far as like literal kids, really just my own and the ones that are at the pool in my neighborhood. That's about it.
Yeah,
I try to avoid them.
Do they get rowdy at that swimming pool? You have to break them up?
Yeah, there's no lifeguard either. I'm getting a little bit.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's what My Chemical Romance song, "The Teenagers Scare the Living Shit Out of Me." Like I finally get it, because especially when you have kids and you're trying to keep them away from teenagers, like yeah, it makes sense now.
I'm okay with kids, but teenagers, yeah, I'm not too thrilled about. John Mulaney, he has a bit in his stand-up about how if he sees teenagers on the side of the road, he will cross the road.
Yeah.
Because like they know how to be mean, but they know how to be mean and be right about it. Like anything they say is gonna be like, oh, that was fucked up, but also extremely true about myself.
Yeah, and they're like almost have a man's body, but not like the wherewithal to not punch a person in public. So yeah, that kind of like, I could probably take you in a fight, but also I'm going to go to jail for it because I'm almost 40 and you're a kid. I don't know why I'm talking about beating kids up right now. But
I agree with that. I think it should be legal to hit a teenager. I don't know why it's illegal. It should be.
I'll sign on.
That, yeah. Okay. So you, me, I mean, this is Texas. There's no rules. We could just go beat up some teenagers. That's fine.
It's heading that way.
Yeah. If you had to fight some teenagers, how would you do it?
Oh man, I'd probably let my dog soften him up first. A Great Pyrenees. That's about. He's still a bit young, but about 100 pounds. I let him kind of, take a couple of good bites out, and then I'd come behind. I've seen you do before. I'm pretty sure I can do that exact same thing.
Yeah, I think so. That would be. Maybe we can recreate the next Ghoulish Book Fest. We can do like teenager fights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great. Be a great event. That would get me arrested.
Advertise that.
Yeah. You want to beat up a teen? Come. We just get one teen and we pay him like $500 for the weekend just to let people beat on him. I don't like the way this conversation's going. I'm going to jail.
Further, you know how there's always those like football teams trying to go to state or whatever, selling water on the side of the road.
Yeah,
we could pay for that at one go.
We could. If any local high school football teams want to get in on this, hit us up, ghoulishpod@gmail.com. We will set something up. Okay, back to kids, not teenagers. The next episode's about teenagers, which is true, actually. I do have a teenager episode I did. Kids specifically. something I've thought about a lot when it comes to Stephen King and why he is so popular and why he's managed to be like the gateway drug for so many other kids to read this genre is most of his most popular books include child point of views. And I think when a kid wants to read something, they don't want to read something from the perspective of a grown up. They want to read from someone's full age. And King has managed to write so many classic books at this point with that specific age group. And it's not just kids doing like YA stuff, right? They're doing grown up shit, but as kids, and they're doing things that the kid who's reading the book would never expect to happen in the book. And I think that kind of unlocks something in the brain. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's just by himself. He's got the ones that you would consider coming of age, but even beyond that, from was it Danny Torrance in The Shining, and then Pet Cemetery. Like you said, a lot, if not most of his, have a younger protagonist or several of them. And I know from my own experience reading it, like you just said, reading about kids that are comparable, your own age, you could see your friends in them. What you may not be in the sewer fighting clowns or doing other unspeakable things in the sewer, that but you can see yourself in it. So I think, yeah, that is key to unlock that initial interest. And that's why he is, like you said, he's a gateway.
Like my gateway entry into King was, I believe, Stand By Me. I mean, I saw the movie first, and then someone told me, oh, this is also a book you can read.
Yeah.
And from there, just keep on going. I mean, the good thing about The Body is it's in a collection with 3 other novellas. So you read that one, you think, well, I have this big book. What else is going on in it? It's really different from The Body. You have a prison break novella, you have a fucking Nazi novella, and then you have one of the few novellas of King's that has not been adapted, the Breathing Method. Have you read that?
Oh.
It's insane. It's been a while since I read it, but I recall it's about a pregnant woman crashing while driving to the hospital, and I think someone's head like fucking flies off. It's insane. I don't know why it hasn't been adapted. I don't know why no one talks about it. It's not that great, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said Keely was the one that you had started with. What brought you to that? Was it the movie or something else?
It was the cover. So Half Price Bookstore, actually, I think it's over closer to your neck of the woods, was still there when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
My second time living in this city. And it was the most provocative cover that was there, and my mom let me get it for whatever reason. Like I said, I was 9 or 10. And then I think it's, considered his first novel. I think he wrote The Long Walk maybe when he was younger, but got published as Richard Bachman later.
Yeah, it's his first published novel. Definitely.
Yeah. So, it's not quite as dense as some of his later works, and you don't have to know all about like The Dark Tower to get into it. It's almost like a Fear Street level book.
Yeah.
That kind of writing, and very just easy to digest even as a 10-year-old. And I guess maybe that's at the time when you're starting to have questions about the girls around you, and then read a book that's kind of talking about a lot of those issues.
Do you think you found it at all confusing at that age because of the way it's written? Because isn't it only like newspaper clippings and like interviews and stuff like that? I don't think it has a traditional narrative, right?
For Carrie?
Yeah.
Oh man, I may have last read it when I was 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So I still have like the images in my head from when I read it, but I couldn't tell you like what's on the page. And then I saw the movie well after that. So yeah, I mean, I guess it was enough that I started. I can't tell you what my second King book was, but it wasn't that long after that The Stand and It and all the other ones. Had I tried those first, I probably wouldn't have stuck around, just like you said.
Yeah. What are some other like good kids in the whole genre that stick out to you? It could be movies or books or anything.
So, I think my mind always goes to coming of age, even though, as we discussed, that not all horror is coming of age. A lot of it isn't, and they just happen to be the protagonists in the book. But Boy's Life is my gold standard, and I don't think that's even really a horror novel from my perspective, but it's written by a horror author. He's kind of carved his own path since then. But as far as coming of age, that one, Summer of Night, was really good. I know there are, like Sadie says, Girls on Bikes book or Boys on Bikes books. She wants a Girls on Bike book.
I like those. Yes, I love Boy's Life. I haven't read Summer of Night. I'm trying to think of other ones. Like now thinking about it specifically with the phrase "boys on bikes," I imagine with the popularity of like Stranger Things, that has just like grasped a massive new audience for that type of fiction.
So that could be part of that, the Renaissance I was alluding to. I think that definitely has something to do with it.
Yeah.
That's when I think a lot of us, we're trying to recapture a certain era, and that 90s, that's kind of like the end of the latchkey generation, where, I don't know, compared to the world you look around and see today,
Right.
It's very easy to fall in love with, how you grew up and want to recreate it.
Is your own childhood something you would want to talk about, or is that too
Sure.
private? Okay, well, when did you grow up, and like what type of childhood did you have, and have you tried writing about that specifically?
So I was a Air Force brat. We lived all over the world. I spent about 10 years here in San Antonio, from kind of on, like, brushing right up against that coming of age. So we left here when I was about 10 or 11. But yeah, had a brother that was 6 years older than me, so old enough to be responsible. And we would do, in retrospect, dumb things, leaving the house without a plan, and $1.50 could like entertain you for the entire day. It's like a stack of Pringles and a Dr. Pepper, and just going to the park. You come home sweaty, and your parents haven't seen you, nor have they cared. Not that my mother, great, she cared, but I was also out of the house, which means out of people's hair. So we did have I guess that's why I was in the emergency room so much when I was a kid. I got scar on my face. My brother hit me with a tennis racket unintentionally. I got run over by a car in a parking lot.
Oh my God.
That was if they had a punch card for the ER, mine would have been filled by the time I was 6, I think. But
Wow.
That's also stories, like you said. Now I look at that stuff fondly. Like my kids,
Yeah.
I get nervous when they go down to the mailbox. Like I'll be out there, like arms crossed, looking around the corner, making sure everything's okay. It wasn't like that growing up. A lot of it was living on base too. Living on Air Force bases, you don't have the same threats as you do on the outside.
Yeah, I was just listening to, I believe it was an episode of a podcast called Script Notes, and they were interviewing somebody who wrote like a TV show, and they also grew up on a base, and they were saying, just like they were talking about like the differences and like the certain safety nets you had living on a base compared to just like some random neighborhood. And it was interesting just to listen to that.
And I think people, they might assume it's because it's gated, and that may be part of it. Also, anything you do, your parents can get in trouble for it.
Mhm.
And so we knew that young. Like if you try to steal, your parents gonna have to go talk to somebody about it, and that's above them. So everybody kind of had that understanding. Whereas outside of the base, it's kind of more of, I guess, of a personal responsibility, or if they don't have that threat hanging over them, then
So as a kid, were you able to leave the base, or was that something you needed to get like permission for ahead of time? I don't know how it works.
Yes, kind of. Like
Mhm.
we lived at Randolph,
Yeah.
when I was an age of like 9 to 11 or so. And I remember back when Batman Forever was out, there was I think it was Wendy's or Burger King that had these glass mugs. So we were
Mhm.
allowed to ride our bicycles off base to go get those glass mugs and then come back. And that was probably about the extent, maybe within, outside of our parents, what they could see.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us too far from the front gate.
I'm like 10 minutes away from Randolph, and man, there's sometimes those jets make it really difficult to record the podcast.
Yeah,
always flying over my house. Last week or the week before, I was outside with the dog, and one flew so low, almost every vehicle alarm on my street just went off at once. It was terrifying.
Our house was by the flight line, so
Yeah.
we're well, I guess you could become immune to it after a certain amount of time, but
Yeah. It's slowly, I'm slowly getting used to it. Like I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Indiana. We didn't have much of that, but moving here specifically to this house, sometimes I'm like, oh shit, is this like an alien invasion? Do I have to gaze at the sky perhaps? Yeah. You know about that book? It's called Stargazers. You wrote it.
Yeah.
I kept, while reading that book, I mean, this isn't too much of a spoiler. I kept waiting for it. It does rain in the book, but I kept waiting for like the solution to be, oh, it rained and they all fucking choked on the rain and drowned.
And I'm sure, I should have added one of those little in between Reddit style posts about someone having like rain coming out of their mouth. That would have been a good visual.
Yeah, that is something I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
Is throughout the book you have these interludes of basically Reddit posts, and I love books like that. Like I don't know if you've read The Sluts by Dennis Cooper or anything by LaRocca. Like the things have, what the fuck is this novella called?
Worse since we last spoke.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Yeah, stuff like that was written through like internet postings. I'm just a weakling for these types of narratives. Like if you say you have a book that's written in the style of a message build, I'm like, I'll give you any amount of money to read this. And you have that, and and you do such a good job. And I just discovered while reading that, when I was looking at I think it was the afternote, maybe it was the bio, you mentioned you had a bunch of stuff on the NoSleep podcast, which I've never listened to, but I understand it's like adaptations of the Reddit subreddit. Is that correct?
I think in its first couple of seasons, it was like pulled from Reddit, but at a certain point, they became more of a submission model.
Okay, so can you talk to me about how you got involved with the NoSleep podcast and how you think that maybe inspired some of this novel, because the novella, because I do think what makes it like really stand out, all these interlude posts that you have, and they're written in such a specific voice that only someone who has spent a lot of time on the internet could have ever even devised.
Oh, so I only put a couple of stories up on the NoSleep Reddit page. I don't know if my ego could handle it at that time in my writing career. The feedback, I would say feedback, that's too gentle a term for what happens when you put a story up that doesn't do well. Or
there's people commenting Taco Bell, right?
Yeah. And there they tried to kind of uphold the illusion that all of this is true. It's all first person horror, and I really experienced it. So that's not really my jam. I think the first one I put up was about a kid that had a gnome stealing strawberries from his, and it was a, what do you call it? Like where they switched the baby out, a changeling story. And it's just not the vibe of NoSleep. So the people that read it just kind of disappeared. That ended up on the podcast. And so I think I put 2 up there total. They didn't even cause a ripple on the Reddit page, but I kept on submitting to NoSleep, and for I'd say the first several, maybe because they were a bit on the longer side, or they were on the pay side of NoSleep. So with NoSleep, it's the first hour or so is free, and then if you're a season pass holder, then there's like a whole nother hour that you get. So I was on the pay side for the first several, and then I had a couple of stories really hit in season 16, and I don't know if I'm like have taken off or considered like one of their big authors. I'm not too aware, but I feel like that was where I kind of got the push a little bit from season 16. And I did the season finale for that one. And then for how it relates to Stargazers, it was I would say a writing device in that if I kept it so narrow to this family, there's so much more happening that they would have no exposure to or awareness of, especially like as things deteriorate. They're not going to be getting news updates, cell phones, all that stuff's going to go away. So to have these little pockets of perspective kind of sprinkled throughout the country of people experiencing different things or seeing it from a different lens than as a writing device, it was good. Also, just to kind of break away from that, the main story that I'm writing, and add some humor in there with like the screen names and people being trolls and stuff like that. So it was fun. I think it's fun to read, and it was actually really fun to write. It kind of broke up, some of the intensity of the story.
Yeah, I also felt extremely true to life that during an event like this, that you would still have these trolls shit posting on like super like traumatic events, either because they look just terrible people or they don't know how to react, they don't know how to cope with something, and this is what they're used to. That's up for the reader to decide, but it's like that's what would happen.
And it would be that those are the last people alive, probably.
Yeah, you have a great moment, and I can cut this if you want me to. Well, someone said something trollish, and then like 10 minutes later, they respond, "Is this on? Is anyone around?" It's like just an echo of a troll. I mean, this is a great book, and it's difficult to talk about too much mill without really giving much away. But I had a ton of fun with it. It's a quick read. I read half of it last night while selling books at a venue, and then the other half this morning. I even messaged you at a certain point saying we have to delay this because I'm at a scene that I am not going to break away from, and really intense scene, really cinematic. I thought, I'm not going to say what scene it is on the podcast, but hot damn, that was brutal.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to. I don't know. I think being a parent, I find my writing drifting more towards that fear of how would you protect your kids?
Yeah.
So I have difficulty writing some scenes like that. Usually I'll have the idea and then I'll pull back from it. So that one I kind of went all the way and had him say some really, that I know which one you're talking about, had this character say some pretty awful things that were difficult to write, but I felt like, that's it's that human monster element. Yeah, everybody's kind of concentrated on the what may be looming overhead, but it's really the people around you that you need to still be wary of.
Yeah. So do you know what everybody is looking at, or do you as the writer not even know? I've had this question a lot, like with my stuff, because I have a lot of ambiguous stuff in mind, and I always get that question. Even though you didn't write what it was, do you actually know? And usually my answer is nope.
I had my own. Yes, for this one, I know what it is, but I wanted to
Yeah.
leave it vague enough that if someone had, say, I would say even a religious interpretation of it, that it's maybe something they could, when they get to that last page,
Mhm.
maybe they could have that perspective on it. It's not at all what mine was, but it's vague enough that they could maybe see that.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think that was the smelt way to go with something like this, with a story like this. You don't want to explain too much. I hate explaining anything, to be honest. I don't like it. I don't like explanations. Don't explain anything to me.
Okay.
If next time we meet, if I ask you a question, just say I don't know.
We will be meeting again,
Yeah, we live really close.
and I'll be at Ghoulish next year. I'm sure I'll see you before then, but
I would hope so. Yeah. We got to get together and look at the sky.
come use my telescope, Max.
I would love to. Can we spy on neighbors? Like you have a good window.
No,
Again,
first time to ask that, but
you mentioned telescopes to me, and I immediately go to peeping toms. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Space telescope, just so there's no confusion that it's not a spying telescope.
Okay, I can spy using anything if I try. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
I think that about wraps it up. Do you have anything else about kids you want to talk about? Like, what's the strangest thing you've ever seen as a kid? What is the strangest thing you've ever done as a kid, etc.?
Oh man, strangest thing seen or done. A lot of dumb stuff. I mean, like I said, I was kind of protected in my little safety net of being on base, but I didn't end up in the emergency room on accident.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, actually, I do have one. So, I was visiting my dad. Parents were separated, so I had the summer with him. He was in Washington, D.C., and taking full advantage. I was the only kid in his apartment. It was just me. And so he would go to sleep because he had to work in the morning. I would stay up watching Conan or Letterman or whatever. And so it was in DC, like I said, not an awful part of DC, but I think there's always a potential for something going down there. It has rough parts to it. So I heard a sound, and at this point, I think I'm 10, maybe 11. Let's say 10. Heard a sounded like gunshots or maybe several car doors slamming at once. So I go to the blinds, and I see into the parking lot a person sprint, like a full sprint. And so I'm following them, like as they're going through the parking lot. And then I see a face 4 inches from mine looking at me. So in my mind, I kind of twisted it. So this person now had a mask, and I don't know, but it was someone that had either been looking at me the entire time, or maybe it was part of whatever the gunshots or slammed doors were, and that's where they were hiding. But like, we made brief eye contact, and I fell to the floor, and I belly crawled out of the room. It took me probably 10 minutes because I was like pressed up against the wall. Checked the front door, which had the same view, and they were not there anymore. But that's probably the most terrifying feeling, like just, kind of being interested in whatever's going on out there as a spectator. And then now it's 4 inches from my face, like separated by glass. Like,
it's terrifying.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I've talked about this in the podcast before, but I'll mention it briefly just because I had something really similar happen to me as a child. I was playing video games. Well, I was watching my brother play video games. I was young, and that's what I did. And it was late at night, and there was some noise outside, and my brother said, "Go check what that was." So I opened the blinds, and the window we were at was directly next to the driveway and the trash cans. So it could have really easily been just raccoons in the trash cans, but it usually was. I opened the blinds, and I'm looking through the glass into the infinite blackness of the night. And what my memory now has is a clown face just suddenly emerged. And I guess the window was open, because all of a sudden the person on the other side pokes me in the eyeball, and I fall down screaming, holding my eye, crying, and my brother runs outside with a baseball bat and doesn't find anything at all, but I had a black eye for the next couple days. So that's always been in my head, of just this clown poking me in the eye. I mean, most likely it was like one of my brother's friends trying to do a prank on him, but instead got me. Well, maybe it was just, maybe it was just some clown from the woods. Who knows?
I think you and I have some suppressed memories. We should probably do a therapy session together.
I don't have health insurance. You paying?
I'll have you on like a speakerphone in my pocket.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
This is Max. He lives in my pocket. Don't give him a telescope. All right. How can people find you online?
Most active on Twitter. So the LP Hernandez. I do have a website. Not sure what to do with it. I have links to all my books that I've been in, all the podcast episodes I've been on, and I post on there occasionally. So that's lphernandez.com. Facebook, author LP Hernandez, almost never post there. Mostly on Twitter, and it's releases through Cemetery Gates Media on July 5th. And if people want an autographed copy, they can hit me up on Twitter. I'll send one to you for about the same as you would pay.
Sounds great. This episode's going to go live on Friday. So
wonderful.
When people listen to it, it's already out. You can go buy it. Go buy it from any place. Buy it directly from LP. That sounds like the best way to do it, I think. Awesome. That's it. That's the podcast, folks. Goodbye. And that was LP Hernandez talking about kids on the Ghoulish Podcast. Go buy Stargazers anywhere you buy books, and go on over to Ghoulish GhoulishBooks.com and buy some of the spooky books I publish. Hell yeah! Books that'll spooky. What will they think of next? I don't know. But if I do find out, I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna profit from it. Because I love profits. That's my bread and butter, baby. Oh.
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.